First of all, introducing our challenger.
Out of the blue corner.
He's going to step in and he does. It's all over.
Let's bring on the boom.
This is Eternal MMA.
All right, everyone, welcome back to a special edition here on the Eternal Insiders Podcast, a breakdown edition for Eternal MMA, specifically related to the upcoming Sydney card for an Eternal 92. Of course, I'm joined by commentary extraordinaire Matt Bones Williams, who has done these podcasts with me before. We've broken down the fights and talked about all the good things coming up, and then we get back on the podcast and we talk about all the good stuff that did happen. So we've got a big card coming up, like we said, for Eternal 92. Couple of title fights, an absolutely cracking main card, followed by some prelims. Interesting detail that you reminded me of the other day, Matt Williams, in preparation for this one, and that this card is completely stacked top to bottom with pro fights. No amateur fights like we normally have on the prelims. This is a stacked card top to bottom with nothing but the pro fights. Just some incredibly good bangers back and forth. We're going to talk all about it. You're going to be at this card, man. I know you're looking forward to this one. This is huge. This is big stuff. UFC's in town. I'm looking forward to it, man. Crazy times.
Yeah, absolutely, bro. And what a way to start 2025. We ended 2024 with a bang, with the double header up on the Goldie. Some incredible fights there. I've been chomping at the bit to get back into it. And yeah, no better way to do it than with an Eternal on the eve of the UFC in Sydney, no less. So yeah, mate. Looking forward to it. 1 week away at the time of recording, and I'm pumped like kid on Christmas.
I would say chomping at the bit, not to get some more hot chicken wings in you by any chance.
Nah, well that came out today, man. Boy, do you reckon the camera adds a couple extra pounds, or was I just fat?
No, that definitely adds a couple of pounds, man. Like, no one looks good on camera, bro. Like, I look at myself, I'm like, oh, a side profiler, what's going on? Like, we're also judgmental of ourselves, mate. Like, you know, something that can't be helped. It's just.
I've been loving the content that Eternal's been pumping out regularly. It's been cool. You know, it's kept us connected to the fighters, to the promotions. It's built a ton of hype. I know, just walking around my gym. A lot of the members, a lot of the fighters are talking about Eternal coming up, and they're talking about the Hot Wings Challenge and everything that's been put out there. So, yeah, it's good. It's good stuff. Eternal's leading the charge.
Leading the charge indeed. A lot of fantastic content. Of course, I was up there for that one. First time I met you in person. Felt like I'd known you my entire life, man, since we've been doing this podcast for a short amount of time. So, can't wait to dive into this one with you and check out all the good fights that are happening. Of course, like we said at the top, we've got two title fights for this Eternal 92 card. At the top of the pile, we have Stephen Costello from Ireland versus David Martinez in the Eternal MMA welterweight division for the Eternal MMA welterweight championship. Of course, Stephen Costello fighting at SBG Ireland under the famed John Kavanagh and coach David Roach, coming with a 5-2 record. Fans will know Stephen Costello was over here late last year. He was supposed to compete against Alden Bates for the interim welterweight championship to then go on and face the now retired Lachlan Deadshot Stitt. Of course, that fight did fall through with a rather severe weight miss by one Alden Bates that led to a lot of heated exchanges on the night, and rightfully so. Stephen Costello left home to go back to Ireland feeling a little bit empty indeed after coming all this way and not getting to compete. We'd hope we get him back to see him back on the card, and of course he's coming back now to fight against David Martinez. Went back to Ireland, got himself some more training in. I had him on the podcast a couple of days ago. He's raring to go. Looking forward to get into it. Interesting prospect he is. I mean, he comes in with some championship experience. Like we said, he's a 5-2 fighter. But his most recent fight that he had back in June 2024 was a pro title fight win in Spain. It must be noted against a very experienced opponent. I believe his opponent was 11-2 at the time, and he got the job done by a round 2 ground and pound finish. So he certainly brings in a strong pedigree to this fight. As we said, going up against David Martinez, of course, fans will be more than familiar with David Martinez, our former two-time Eternal MMA lightweight champion. Brings in an impressive 14-6 record to this one, looking to make it 3 Eternal belts on his shelf, moving up in weight for this one to fight for the welterweight championship. He's been making his way down to Team Compton as an interesting tidbit for one David Martinez. We know about his game in terms of his grappling and training with the boys down there at Team Compton. No doubt that can only mean good things for his striking pedigree as well. He comes into this one on a 3-fight win streak. Most recently against Wes Kappa, Luke Daly, nice feather in his cap. Brenton Mumford most recently, of course, at the last card that we were just at for Eternal 90, had that beautiful arm triangle submission in the first round. Now, of course, it must be noted that David has struggled with his weight issues recently, but that was at lightweight. He's made the right move to go up to welterweight now. That last fight against Brenton Mumford was, of course, at welterweight. So it set us up nicely for this nice title fight at the top of Eternal 92. A nice international flavour with having Stephen Costello come back from Ireland to face off against David, making the move up to welterweight. Some cool little interesting storylines in this fight, man. Here to break it all down. What are your thoughts about this fight, man? I'm very much looking forward to this one.
Yeah, I was so disappointed when I didn't get to see Stephen Costello fight up there in Perth. He was raring to go. He's a really big welterweight. Got to have a chat to him up there, and he had rehydrated post the weigh-in debacle, and he is a big man. Very physical, of course. Has a athletic background in playing rugby over there in Ireland. He knows how to swing him too. The athleticism carries his creative kicking game. He's got good long kicks, can fight out of both stances, and can punch good, nice, clean, accurate from both stances too. So he'll be looking to throw up some dilemmas for David Martinez and impose his size and his range, no doubt. And then David Martinez, well, look, he's fought some really good strikers, and like you rattled off a couple names there. Of course, back in the Gold Coast, he fought Brenton Mumford, who came out like a house on fire. Clipped Martinez, which we have to say it, like Martinez has never really had a problem with his chin, has he? I believe Blake Donnelly, one of Australia's better MMA strikers, probably the only person to really hurt him bad in recent times. And Luke Daly is people starting to get to know that bloke and know just what he brings to the table. He's a very good striker. David Martinez is hanging with these guys. Wes Kappa, one of the most experienced strikers we have in Australia across the codes, and carried that across into MMA. And when we talk about stepping up in weight, Wes Kappa, he's plied most of his trade at a catch weight or close up to welterweight, super lightweight. The Luke Daly fight, I believe Martinez missed weight for that from memory, and that was fought at a catch weight too. And then Brenton Mumford up at welterweight. So it's not like he's undersized at welterweight. He's a big old lump. Is David Martinez. He's now working with a nutritionalist, so he'll be filling out, working with some big guys in that room down there at Team Compton, and of course at Ignite. Blair Bretag stepping up to light heavyweight on this card as well. So moving around with some big bodies. David Martinez, it's no secret. Like there's no secret ingredient in the sauce. It's the jab plus the low kick plus the wrestling. And the way I see this, there's a couple of interesting things stylistically in this. And Costello, he often stands very tall and quite narrow at times to facilitate his kicking game, to use his range. He'll need to be careful doing that against Martinez, who's really apt at shooting in and getting on the hips, driving it back to the cage where he can implement his grappling system. And he'll like having 5 rounds. I reckon David Martinez, he'll look at those big old muscles of Stephen Costello and go, well, let's see how they look after the 20th minute. And he'll look to drag him down into deep waters. So really interesting matchup. Look, had a heart in my mouth moment there where the GFL, the Geriatric Fight League, put up a graphic of Stephen Costello earlier in the week saying he'd been signed. Well, they've proven to be a bunch of frauds across the board. I'm not sure if you watched the draft there, Luke, but it was a circus from start to finish. All it needed was a Benny Hill gorilla and an old lady with an umbrella. Daryl Owens, he's the ringmaster of the circus out there, isn't he?
That was strange. Yeah, I did see the post, and I mean, I didn't actually watch the draft itself, but I did just tune in for a couple of random breakdown YouTube videos of everything that was going on there with the GFL. I mean, nice, fun idea in concept and everything, but it doesn't seem like these phantom announcements as far as signing fighters were exclusive to Stephen Costello, because everything I saw from quite a few of their posts was just different fighters either saying like, I haven't signed, or people saying, isn't he still fine at this particular promotion? So bit of an odd one, but we did have Stephen Costello on the podcast. That'll actually be coming out right now. Actually, that'll be up on YouTube if, obviously no one's watching this live, but it's up on YouTube as of now. And he did give a bit of a clarification around that, saying that he was sent a contract by the GFL, didn't sign it, was obviously keeping his options open, obviously knew that he was fighting for Eternal, wanted to come back here and fight for Eternal, and said that on social media that he's coming back over here to give us a title fight. So like you, heart was in my mouth a little bit there, thinking we're going to lose that one. We didn't want to lose that after we already lost Alvin Bates versus Stephen Costello. By God, if we lost this one versus David Martinez, that just would have been a bit of a kick in the gut. So Stephen Costello, welcome back to the country, man. It's great to talk to you. Great to have you here for a title fight. And just on that, continuing to sort of foster this relationship with a lot of different nations that we have been in recent times. Obviously, a lot of Asian nations and that sort of thing. We've had a lot of Japanese representation, a lot of Korean representation. To have guys from Europe now coming over and fighting against our guys and in title fights, and Stephen Costello is the next one to sort of do that. Is a very cool thing to see. So that is a very fascinating matchup. Like you said, Matt Bones Williams. So many different fat sets, two completely different fighters. Obviously, David moving up in weight class. Stephen having to make the journey back and forward from Ireland in a couple of times in a matter of months. Let's see how it shakes out. But that will be for what is essentially now the vacant welterweight title. Now that we've had Lachlan Deadshot Stitt seemingly retire out of nowhere, this is for all the marbles at the top of that one. So let's see where that one goes. Let's see how it plays out. We, of course, do have Sebastian Szalay versus Taser Malone squaring off for the Eternal MMA Featherweight Championship. Now, of course, Sebastian Szalay is the new Eternal MMA Featherweight Championship, as he ran the gauntlet in that incredible Featherweight Grand Prix that we had recently. Back-to-back cards for Eternal 86 and Eternal 87, respectively, not any more than 2 months apart from each other. But had him on the pod, obviously, recently in the last couple of days as well, talking about that as well, and just very impressive in terms of, and this will come out in the pod, but how he sort of made his way through that tournament, dealing with a few things. He was dealing with a nasty staph infection from what he was telling me, dealing with some injuries that he was. But he comes into this one on a 6-fight winning streak as well, just the one loss on his record in his first title defense against Taser Malone. I mean, we've talked a bit about Seb Szalay on the podcast, and the most unique thing about Seb is that really cool, very fan-friendly karate-style base that he has, but mixed with the power that he has in his hands. While that all but two of his wins have gone to decision, he has that one-punch knockout power in his hands that we saw, of course, against Joe Davis at Eternal 78. That one as well in Sydney, so maybe there's something in the water there for Seb Szalay, being a Sydney man that he is these days. But for Seb, he has said that the plan is that he wants to defend his title. He wants to become the best featherweight in Australia, and the plan is to move on and become a UFC featherweight champion as well. That is certainly his vision. But to do that, he's got to get through the machine out of CMBT on the Gold Coast. That is Taser Malone. He's earned his title shot after starting his career in an impressive 4-0 record. Recently punctuated by a second-round finish over the vastly more experienced veteran in Jesse Medina at Eternal 88. That's an impressive turnaround for a man that started his amateur career where he lost four of his 6 fights, I believe, being finished 3 of those times. And I know, of course, the amateur ranks are obviously for learning and all that sort of stuff. But to start your career 4-0 in the pro ranks after that is a nice, impressive turnaround for him. One of the things that should be highlighted too with Taser Malone is just his toughness. I mean, he showed off his grit and toughness at Eternal 83. I mean, you were there for this one, man, when he fought against Ethan Mitchell, grinding out that win against a young, elusive striker like Ethan Mitchell. I mean, if you looked at just the faces after the fight, you'd swore Taser lost that fight. But he just showed off just the determination, the grit, and the heart to come out and just grind out that pressure-heavy win that he's so famous for already in his young career. He's predicting that he's going to take Seb into deep waters for this one. They call him a machine for a reason. He believes he's seen the holes in Seb's game. We'll find out on the night, I guess, but this is just another one that's a fascinating matchup. I mean, this is a really, on-paper matchup for me, just two completely different styles. The point-style karate fighter with the heavy hands versus the cardio and the machine and the wrestling heavy pressure that is Taser Malone. What do you see in this one, brother? This is a cool fight.
Yeah, well, Seb Szalay, I know I've said it before, but I think he currently in Australia he's the best unsigned talent that we have. I think he's the gold standard, both with the way he puts together his striking, but also his anti wrestling is top tier. So guys have tried to press him up on the fence. Guys have tried to keep him down, but he stays so calm under fire. And then when he's given space to move, his footwork is unparalleled. So his ability to move his feet, be balanced, find his opponents out of position, and make them pay is top notch. Particularly, there's one thing I notice about when I'm watching Seb Szalay fight, and that's he fights in phases. That he draws guys into the contest, he moves his feet to a new position, and he catches them in a second phase, either disengaging or when they're out of position. He's just so good at that. He's great on the inside with short, fast work, and the attribute that allows him to facilitate that kind of work is his timing and his offbeat rhythm. So he hits guys on a little half beat, which comes from his karate base, and he can hit you from everywhere too: punches, elbows, knees, and kicks from both stances, and from anywhere in the cage. He'll quite happily fight you with his back to the cage and circle off. For a lot of guys, they'll go into more of a defensive mode when they arrive there. So yeah, he's a really difficult prospect for anyone, and you know he's on a 6-fight win streak, I believe, 6 fights.
Yeah.
You look at some of the names that he's taken on. Dimps Gillies, one of my favourite fighters in Australia, known for his volume and aggressive boxing. And you watched Seb Szalay up there in Perth kind of dictate the rhythm and kind of lull Gillies into his cadence of the fight and dictate how he wanted that to proceed. And no one's really been able to do that to Gillies to make them play his game. He always plays the game he wants. Gabriel Slut, a guy who was undefeated, a Brazilian, a credential Muay Thai fighter, Brazilian black belt. Dan Jones, like Szalay just casts a spell over these guys all day and finds a way to finish first with his nose in front. He's just so good at that. And you know, as a featherweight, as an Australian featherweight, obviously getting to train in the gym with Volkanovski and that small room that they have out there at Freestyle, a really good room. He's the goods everywhere. Well, look, when I saw that this fight was announced, my initial thoughts were like, oh, Taser Malone, is that not too soon? But I guess because in retrospect, he's certainly earned his spot, and he's so active. It just feels like he hasn't been a pro very, very long, but he's been knocking them over. And Taser Malone stopped.
I don't know if you can hear me, but it's cut out for me. You've frozen. Hey, we're back. We just had some technical difficulties. A little bit of an internet mishap. Sounds like down Matt Bones' way, down the road, down in Torquay there. But we're back here. We're just talking about Taser Malone, so we can kick straight back into it. Matt, you're just giving a bit of shine to Taser Malone and his credentials for this title fight. If you can remember where you're up to before I got left frozen with your beautiful face on screen, let's pick it up where we left off. Where were we at? Taser Malone.
Well, Taser Malone just rappelled through my ceiling and karate kicked me in the side of the head for saying that I thought it might have been too soon that he entered into this championship bout before I was reminded that he has been on an absolute tear, and he just hasn't been a pro very long. Like that, but he just knocks them together in Taser Malone style. As he does. I'm not sure if he's fought outside of Queensland. You know, Southport's certainly been his home, but I don't think that'll matter to Taser Malone. He's so driven. His mental toughness and his will is certainly one of his biggest attributes that will carry him forward into this championship bout. His cardio is insane. So it's like some guys they can really weaponize that cardio, and over the course of 5 rounds, I think, in that format, that's where we'll really see Taser Malone shine in those later rounds. If he can drag the champion Szalay down into that 4th and the 5th, and try and grind him out, that's where he'll have his best opportunities. And you can't write the CMBT guys off. Like, there's no doubt that Taser Malone is the underdog in this. I think he'll probably relish that. I think the CMBT guys, Miles and Jesse Yada and Brenton, the rest of the team will relish that, and they'll come into Sydney trying to knock off the hometown guy, and I'll see that as a welcome challenge. So I'm really interested to see what will happen here. The machine, he's proven everyone wrong time and time again, and I'm sure he'll be looking. Yeah, even when he was an amateur, I remember he was saying one day I'll be the featherweight champion when he was competing as an amateur in the lightweight division. So manifesting his own reality as the machine.
No, he's been manifesting his own reality from the back of his van when he used to camp out the front of CMBT in the van that I used to interview him out of in the podcast back in the early days. So he's always had the drive, and he's always had the determination. Like, no one can question him on that. If people are questioning whether he's ready for this fight, it's certainly not something that he's just kind of landed in by mistake. Like, since he's been in this game with the guys down at CMBT, he's been giving it absolutely everything. He's a big believer in sacrifice for the game, and that's just classic Taser Malone. And I mean, you talk about fighting outside of Queensland. I mean, there's a big reason why he fights exclusively in Queensland. It's because he's so popular there. So to see him in a title fight against Sebastian Szalay, who's of course a New South Wales man, we're just taking 2 extremely popular, talented fighters with 2 very different game plans and 2 different styles, and kind of throw them together, and it's just going to make for some really incredible theatre that we get to see as part of this main card. And I mean, you can say that ditto for Seb Szalay in terms of just his preparation. I mean, you talked to, obviously he's from the team at Freestyle MMA there. I mean, we know the ilk of those boys down that way. So many names in that gym that we don't have to make mention of. Of course, he's now the Eternal Featherweight Champion, following on from Justin Van Heerden, who was the previous Featherweight Champion for Eternal MMA. So we certainly know what those boys are made of there, and they've contributed so much towards Eternal MMA. And like you said, man, I can't wait for this one. I know we're going to say this about so many fights, but this is genuinely one of my top ones that I've been looking forward to for so long, and definitely a really good way to kick off this 2025 with just a couple of cracking title fights, man. Like, we're blessed, aren't we? We're blessed to get this good stuff. It's incredible.
We are indeed. Yes. Yeah, we are indeed. But I think whoever can dictate the pace in this fight over 25 minutes and can play it at their at the speed that they want to play it at, will come out with their hand raised after 25 minutes if it should go that long.
That's the key. Who can likely go the 25 full minutes and come out on top? That's going to be the interesting telltale for the fight here, this one. So we have Alan Philpott with a new opponent before this one, facing off now against Tomoya Hirakawa, a very experienced fighter out of Japan. Now, Alan Philpott, obviously a very experienced fighter in his own right. He was originally slated to fight off against Shantaram Maharaj, I believe. That fight fell through, so here we are fighting against Japan's Hirakawa. Now, one of the most experienced fighters on the roster, of course, is Alan Philpott. I believe 37 pro fights to his name already. He's fought all over the world. He's fought, of course, here. He's fought in Europe. He's fought in Asia, Oceania. Like, he's been absolutely everywhere. I mean, at the moment, he's lost 5 of his last 6 fights, with his most recent win coming via rear naked choke in round 2 over Sean Etchell, who, of course, is on this card as well. Sean Etchell, a former 2-time Eternal MMA champion, a veteran and a legend of the sport. He said for this one, Alan Philpott, that he's gone back to his roots for this fight. He's going back to some old school training methods, and he's focusing a lot more this time around, specifically on the quality over the quantity side of his game. One of the things that I love about Alan Philpott, I mean, he's such a firebrand. He's always got so much to say. He never shies away from the social media game. He's always seemingly never short of enemies. He's always seemingly never short of a beef. He's such a polarizing figure, but he's just one of those guys that when Alan Philpott's on the card, you know he's bringing it, win or lose, draw, whatever. You know he's bringing a good time. You know he's going to hype the fight up. He's predicting a first round TKO submission in this one. As always cocky for a good reason. He's a hell of a fighter. He always brings his A game. But, I mean, look, he's going up against a very experienced guy in Hirakawa by his own right. This is a guy out of Japan, like we said, that's fighting under UFC veteran Takanori Gomi. 37 years of age. He's definitely the oldest fighter on the card. I mean, look, when you combine these fights, I think it's like 61 pro fights between them. So if you want to talk about experience on the card, like 61 pro fights between two guys, I mean, this is about as high level in terms of experience you get. That's something I mentioned at the top of the show in terms of fostering these relationships for fighters coming over from different parts of the world. This is another in a long line of Asian-based fighters that are coming over here and fighting these guys and networking and mixing it up and continuing to build this strong relationship between Australia and between Asia. It's a very cool thing to see. This is a guy that originally wanted to be a teacher and a soccer coach as well, but he met the Japanese legend, MMA legend that is Takanori Gomi, and he took him under his wing. And here he is. He's fighting on short days, on short notice, but he's coming in with confidence. Believes he's going to get the job done over Alan Philpott. He says that fans can expect nothing from Philpott, and he's going to get the job done on February 8th. So this is, sitting underneath a couple of nice title fights, but in terms of the experience factor between two really wily veterans, this is a fun fight that we have in the featherweight division, man. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. The bantamweight division, my apologies.
Yeah, Alan Philpott doing a lot of his training out of Lions Den Academy now too, I believe. 37 pro fights. Now, one of the interesting things about Alan Philpott is when he keeps it on the plates of meat, he is often unbeatable. I believe in 37 pro fights, he's only been KO'd once on his feet, and he's only been lost by decision once, I believe. I think all of the rest, his kryptonite, have been submission-based losses.
Yeah.
I believe that's true as a pro, and that's a pretty telling stat, right? And you look at his last couple losses. There was that the Rod Costa one up in Perth, the grudge match where he got caught with the modified arm triangle from the bottom.
Yep.
That was an unusual one. He had the win against Etchell, which was rear naked choke, believe it or not. That was panning out to be a really exciting fight on the feet until it went to the ground. Really good grappling exchanges. And then Abdullah Biada got him with an arm triangle too. So and rear naked chokes have kind of been his kryptonite through time. But on the feet, his counter fighting is top tier. He's got a big amateur boxing pedigree. He's from Northern Ireland. You know, they're famous for their amateur boxing up there. And I like hearing that he's gotten back to basics. He tells us that going back to his roots of running, of sprints, of hill climbs, hill sprints, have been really good for him. He's done a bit of soul searching coming back into this one. He's always driven, isn't he, Alan Philpott? Always is goal orientated and hungrier than ever after 37 fights, and he'll certainly have to be as he takes on Tomoya Harakawa, who I was talking to Cam O'Neill. Hirakawa's actually moved over here for a short time and had been training back in Japan, so he's fit as a fiddle. So it was good timing that this opportunity popped up because he was already here. So he gets this opportunity fighting out of the Fireball Kids Gym, as you mentioned, which is an interesting point, right? So Takanori Gomi, when he fought, he was incredibly aggressive. That's why he got the fight name the Fireball Kid. He had some good submission game, but what he preferred and when you see guys fighting out of the gym prefer is ground and pound. So he got a lot of TKOs from positions where he could maintain control and bang away with the punches and the elbows, which is what I've seen of Hirakawa. So he, as a bantamweight, has a good percentage of stoppages. He's hungry. He chases to finish. All those guys do from the shoot boxing background. 50% of his wins coming by way of stoppage, and does a lot of damage from the ground and pound, but doesn't necessarily chase the submission. So will he have a look at Alan Philpott's fights? I'm sure he will. Will he change his game? I'm not so sure. At 37 years old, and you say he's the oldest on this card. Well, he'd probably be the youngest on a geriatric fight league card, and certainly maybe right on the medium age there. But it's exciting. Like classic southpaw is Hirakawa. That shoot boxing style with a push forward with the hands and try and shoot it on a double and get something going. So, yeah, really exciting fight between two veterans. That's a good, solid fight that deserves to be right up the top of a big card like this.
And no doubt a lot of good fan representation for Alan Philpott. Because I think the last time that I saw Alan Philpott fight in Sydney, there was a lot of Northern Irish fans in the crowd ready to go crazy for him. So no doubt we'll see some good representation there. No doubt, obviously, the place will be packed anyway. But anytime there's an Alan Philpott fight on, he's got a lot of support there too. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. We do have also Cam Rouston versus Alfred Stoddard in the middleweight division. Of course, we recently saw Cam Rouston at the end of last year when he got himself back in the winners column at the end of the year with 2 solid wins. Of course, the last fight that he had was on Eternal 91. Of course, out of City Kickboxing, 10-3, the Battle Giraffe himself. I don't know if it's an official nickname that he's going by, but I keep seeing the Battle Giraffe around as a nickname for that man, and I love it. It's certainly very fitting. But of course, he defeated Blair Breitag at Eternal 91, getting himself the submission there and getting himself back in the winners column. Of course, he did have his shot on Dana White's Contender Series. That halted his aspirations, of course, for getting himself into the UFC, as he didn't come away for the win. But since then, he's kept himself supremely busy. He wants to stay active. He got those couple of wins, like we said. Still just 30 years of age, so still got plenty of time on his side, entering the prime of his career. But, look, for me, it's certainly go time now for Cam Rouston. I had him on the podcast recently, said he wants to keep active. He's got a lot of fantastic attributes, like a tall, lanky guy, who really likes to dictate the grappling side of the game, but also simultaneously is training at one of the best striking gyms, or arguably the best kickboxing gym in the world, at City Kickboxing, under one of the greatest coaches in the world, in Eugene Berriman. I think one of the most telling things about Cam Rouston is for all 10 of his wins, he's never been to decision. Like when this man wins, he's a 10-3 fighter, but when he wins the fight, he's a guaranteed walking finishing machine. 7 submission wins to his name and 3 KOs. So we know if he's getting the win, he's coming away with the finish, which is something that makes me laugh, because any time I see him give a prediction online or any of his fight notes, he's always saying that he's going to lay and pray his way to a 15-minute decision win. So I call absolute bullshit on that, because he's never done that once in his life in a win. But he's a very entertaining man, is Cam Rouston, and that was a fantastic win that he had against Blair Breitag as well, who's a real up-and-comer in the middleweight division. Of course, he's now fighting this card in the light heavyweight division, but that was a really nice bounce-back win for him. He's, of course, going up against Alfred Stoddard. Now, Alfred Stoddard, the man originally out of Zimbabwe, he's living in Sydney, Australia now, where he trains at SBG Sydney under Ben Power and Nick Kennedy. He's coming with a 4-3 record. He's traded a few wins and losses over his last few fights, but this is a man that's never in a boring fight. I think back to the fight that he had against Damien Villar, and that was at Eternal 84, and that was one of my favorite fights that I've seen in so long. Like, the amount of times that I thought that fight was going to be finished. And shout out to Damien Villar there too, because like how he sort of withstood that absolute onslaught. Like, I was selfishly wanting that fight to continue, but I wanted it to end because it just looked so painful for both those guys involved. But just what an absolute slobber knocker, and just a credit to both of those guys. Like, just insane stuff, man. Like, I loved it. Unfortunately for Alfred, he didn't keep the win streak going. He had that loss against John Martin Fraser at Eternal 88, of course. But he bounced back against John Varkey outside of Eternal MMA. Of course, John Varkey also training out of City Kickboxing. That's a very nice feather in his cap. Given the gym that he trains out of, and given the experience that John Varkey has, a massive career that he's had so far, a lot of experience. So that's a very nice win for him to get. And he's certainly looking to back it up with another win here. He said that he wants to be an extremely active fighter, and he said he wants to get to 40 pro fights at the end of his career. Said he wants to fight 5 times a year. Interestingly enough, one thing I did see on social media recently from Alfred Stoddard, someone made a comment on Instagram regarding the upcoming Matt Myers versus Darcy Vendy, or should I say Darcy Vendy versus Matt Myers middleweight title fight coming up at Eternal 94. Someone said, should Alfred be the man that gets the next shot to whoever wins that? He chimes in and says, no, I don't want any part of that. he's looking to go on to bigger and better things. And not so much those words, I'm paraphrasing there, but that was an interesting tidbit from Alfred Stoddard. But like, hey, everyone carves their own path. This is another fascinating matchup between a couple of guys that want to do their own thing in the middleweight division. What do you see, man? What's going on with this one?
Yeah, I really like Cam Ralston. And last time I got to call Alfred Stoddard's fight in Sydney, I felt like I was in a scene from Roadhouse in that venue that we're packed into there, people leering over the top of the third row, and it was cool, man. It was cool. He's an entertainer, and yeah, it was one hell of a fight. But Cam Ralston, boy, man, he's a tough prospect at middleweight. Like you say, big, tall, and lanky, but it's one thing to be that. It's another thing to know how to use that. Two-time champion on King of the Ring, which is New Zealand's and probably Oceania's premier kickboxing black tie event. Guys like Dan Hooker, Israel Adesanya have come through that, Brad Riddell, you name it, and he's stood there with the best of them. New Zealand, it's kickboxing pedigree. For those who weren't around in the mid 2000s and before that is top notch. So guys like Ray Sefu, who's doing big things over in the States now. One of the best K1 fighters to come out, cut his teeth over in Pride. Mark Hunt, Sugar Shane, Chapman. So many guys. Israel Adesanya, massive K1 career. Brad Riddell, all these guys. And Cam Ralston just following on through that lineage. So he can really mix it up on the feet, knows how to throw them, and when it hits the ground, he knows how to tie up in a way that you're not supposed to be tied up and choke you out, snap stuff. And he's a bad dude, man. And that's I love his finishing mentality. He goes in there and tries to get you out every round, and with great success too. He was on a massive win streak until he got to Dana White's Contender Series and fought Torres Finney, who was just like a cannonball with eyes in the middle, and just looked freakishly strong. And you can't doubt Roaston's heart after that, man, because he got taken in so many times, kept popping back up, and that's the first time I saw him on the big stage. And when I saw that he was coming back to fight in Australasia, I was rapt, man, to call his fight against Blair Bretag. Yeah, great. He showed some really excellent skills and in that and ring craft, staying along with the strikes. When Blair Bretag got into the middle range, Ralston would just suffocate it, go chest to chest and clinch and tie him up. And he did that time and time again. An interesting matchup going up against Alfred Stoddard. You mentioned his fight with Vake over there in Auckland, so he'll be looking to avenge that. They're a super tight team at CKB. They've got they compare themselves to a professional sports outfit, so it's not about the individual, it's about the team. And he's been working in this camp alongside Adesanya, who's got Imavov in Saudi Arabia this weekend, and of course Kevin Jusset, who's another Frenchman, who's fighting John McAuliffe the day after. So they're coming into this as a team, and they'll need to, because Stoddard, Cam Ralston, he's from Sydney, isn't he? So you have a bit of hometown support too.
Yeah.
He'd be loving that. So good to see him back in the regional scene and right at the top too with Eternal MMA. Alfred Stoddard, such a good creative kicking game. You spoke about their SPG team. They've got a great system. He's a Taekwondo black belt, which I don't usually put a lot of value in unless they can adapt it to MMA, and some guys have. And Stoddard is one of those guys. And when it hits the ground, he's got a really dangerous guard too. He's got dangerous jiu-jitsu from the bottom. So he's a tough prospect. And with Matt Myers and Vindy dusting it up in March at Eternal 94, I'm surprised to say Stoddard's not interested in that. I wouldn't be particularly interested in fighting Mad Dog Matt Myers or Darcy Vindy after what we saw of him in the Gold Coast. But, you bet you're given half an opportunity, Cam Ralston will be kicking the door down and outstretching one of those 7-metre long arms to try and get hold of that bout and earn his ticket to the big show if he doesn't punch it come 2 weeks' time in Sydney.
No, and look, just talking about Cam Raston as well, and that fight that he had against Blair Bratag. I mean, when you look at his submission credentials and the 7 submission wins that he has on his record, and you'd be able to talk about this better than me, but it was sort of an unusual finish from that position that he was in with the rear naked choke. Because I mean, from my position as well, sitting cage side, like he was kind of off to the side a little bit, and I thought, that Blair was going to sort of turn into it and kind of be able to escape, but it just sort of, I guess it's just the grip strength of Cam Raston to be able to finish it from that kind of awkward position, because he wasn't square on his back with his arm like right across the crux of the neck. It was in that weird sort of off position, and he still managed to get the finish done. Like that's high level stuff that I don't think a lot of people are finishing from that position.
Well, I can't remember the specific mechanics of the
Yeah, he was like right
choke,
him. Yeah, like
but
just yeah.
But a high level grappler will understand, how a choke works, how a blood choke works, how to get the blade of the wrist across the carotid artery. They understand when to squeeze, when not to squeeze, when to chase a choke, and that comes with a lot of time spent on the mats, which Cam Ralston certainly has. And he's a room full of absolute killers down there too. So. But also speaks to, his finishing instincts. A lot of guys will, if they feel like, chokes, 70% there, they might bail out on that and choose the high percentage option of coming up on top and punching and securing the position. But he's a finisher, man. He's an exciting guy to have around here at Eternal MMA, and we should enjoy him for as long as we got him, because I'm sure there's big things in the future for Cam Ralston.
Certainly should. I mean, either way this fight comes out, whether it's a finish from either guy, whether it goes the distance, I mean, it's guaranteed fireworks. It's like we said, Cam Ralston, guaranteed finish. And Alfred Stoddard doesn't know how to be in a boring fight, win or lose. So we're certainly in for a treat with that one. We get a fight happening at flyweight that was originally scheduled, I believe, sometime last year that fell through due to injury on behalf of Shane Parker. Shane Parker versus Sean Etchell. In the flyweight division. And I mean, this is another matchup when you talk about kind of a clash of styles. I mean, this one sort of jumps out on paper as sort of part of that. I mean, you talk about Shane Parker, a 5-6 MMA professional record, but he comes in with a wealth of experience, particularly from the grappling side of things. He's a 2-time Commonwealth Games Australian representative, 9-time national wrestling champion, and also 4-time Oceanic wrestling champion as well. So now an MMA wrestling coach coming to this one with an 11-fight pro record. But I mean, you look at his record, and he started his pro career like way back in 2012. So I mean, you look at his record and you see 5-6, but I mean, he's been in there with some of the OGs of the game too. Like he's fought the likes of Tim Moore. Tim Moore, of course, an OG from back in the day with Eternal MMA. Another guy that's coming back. It's cool to see him. Shout out Tim Moore. But he's been in there with guys like Shannon Ross and Paul Loger as well, to name a few. But coming back to fight against Sean Etchell, this is a fight, like we said, that fell through, but a fight that he has been calling for, and a fight that he's glad to get back. Obviously, his strengths lie within the grappling side of the game. When you just look at his credentials across the board that we just mentioned there, that's a very fascinating element to see how that's going to stack up against a game like Sean Etchell. He's foreseeing a war with this one. Got a lot of respect for Sean Etchell. Like we said, can't wait to get in there with him, and it's just another fascinating fight that we'll see play out on paper. But it'd be his first fight in 12 months as well. I think it was last year, maybe March, I think was his last fight, potentially. So about 12 months since we last seen him. So it'd be interesting to see, that amount of time out of the cage and dealing with a couple of injuries that he had, what he comes back like, against the buzzsaw himself. When you talk about legends of the game, like Sean Etchell is one of those names that you have to mention when talking about OGs, not just for Eternal MMA, but for Australian MMA in general. Of course, Sean Etchell is a former flyweight champion, is a former bantamweight champion for Eternal MMA as well. I mean, he won his first title way back at Eternal MMA 6 with a decision win against the aforementioned Tim Moore for that flyweight title, starting his pro career back in 2012 with a 4-0 record. Then lost the title to Tim Moore at Eternal 12 back in 2015. But 6 years later, he then goes on to become the bantamweight champion as well at Eternal 59 with a win over Sam Hibbard. So he's had an incredible story career. I mean, look, maybe his career quite hasn't turned out the way he wanted. He did compete on that road to the UFC show. Didn't get the win there, of course. Lost in the first round, and that kind of started a bit of a skid for him went on to lose his next 4 fights, I believe. But you look at that, it's hard to believe that the man's still just 31 years of age. I actually thought that Sean Etchell was much older than that for some reason. I can't believe he's actually still 31 because he's just one of those guys that has seemingly been around forever. And I mean, he realistically has 7-6 record now, but he's a finisher through and through. 5 finishes to his name for his 7 wins. So, the buzzsaw is just a man that you can never sleep on. He's just in terms of his skill set and what he brings to the table, it's not truly reflective of his record. He was a guy that was on the cusp of really sort of going on to the next thing, but I'm sure he'll be looking to start the second phase of his career at just 31 years of age, look to get the job done against Shane Parker at Eternal 92, and maybe set himself up for whatever he kind of wants to do next. But yeah, it all starts at Eternal 92 for these boys. Another fascinating matchup in the flyweight division.
Yeah, this is a cool fight, man. This is a cool fight between 2 veterans. Shane Parker, he's from rival gym in Castle Hill, so he'll be looking forward to mixing it up with some of his crew out there in the crowd. His last fight, he I'm not sure if you saw it, he took on Aaron Toe, who's a really aggressive, hard hitting Kiwi, puts the pressure on. Before that was Nakora Lee Kingi, another Kiwi, so he's just trying to take all the Kiwis out. He got the win on that, rear naked choke actually. Nakora, he's a very high-level kickboxer and Muay Thai fighter. And you could probably make some comparisons there to Sean Etchell's ability to strike. And probably the path to victory. Shane Parker's always done well against high-level strikers. His hands. He carries his hands quite low. Carries his hands against the chest, but he does a good job of creating a little bit of chaos. And if you overload in front of him, he's going to get a scramble going, and he's going to find a way to drag you down to the mat as Shane Parker. And he's got really good finishing instincts when he gets there too. Loves to swing big on the feet as well, so he's always entertaining no matter where the fight goes. And Sean Etchell have a Launceston boxing club, isn't he? Launceston boxing and MMA club. He's struggled against grapplers at times. Colton Kilbassa's probably laid out the blueprint for Shane Parker. Colton Kilbassa from Phuket, the American Marine, who's setting up his own gym, I believe, at the moment over there in Phuket. He'll be watching this closely because he out-wrestled and pitched a bit of a shutout on Sean Etchell down in Sydney as well. And Rod Costa had some success against Sean Etchell by finding his back. And the rear naked choke has been the kryptonite for Sean Etchell the whole way through, so he'll need to be very careful to make sure that whiz is in place, don't overload, back Parker up, and try not to expose his back to the grappling specialist. But no matter which way you shake this one, man, it's going to be a fun fight on the feet, on the ground, and 2 veterans will be keen to put on a performance in front of that massive that Sydney audience that's turning up to Rosehill Gardens.
Yeah, I'm glad we got that fight back because, like I said, that was a fight that fell through. So one of those ones that we did get it back. We do get to see it finally happen at Eternal 92. So cannot wait to see how that one shakes out for sure. Another one of many fascinating fights in this card. We also get some action in the light heavyweight division. Luke Stockman versus Blair Bratag, who, of course, was fighting the majority of his career at middleweight. Did actually start his career at light heavyweight, but he's returning to light heavyweight for this fight. You look at the guy, Luke Stockman, I mean, he's 1-1 in his career so far. Young fighter out of Canberra. So we're seeing a few fighters start to come out of Canberra now. It's not sort of a city I normally thought about too much in terms of seeing fighters come out of that particular part of the country. So it is cool to start seeing a few more guys coming over to fight for Eternal MMA out of that particular region. Interestingly enough, I found this a bit of a funny tidbit. No one's going to find this funny but me. But training out of Magna Fight Club. Now, I bought my Mitsubishi Magna from Canberra, ironically enough. So that was a nice, fun little lineup for me. That was 15 years ago. I still got the Magna at the front there. So, I mean, that's just a funny little personal inside joke for me. I had a little giggle when I saw that particular little tidbit for Luke Stockman there. But, I mean, he started his pro career in 2024. Nice debut win in round 1 after going 3-0 as an amateur. He's a big boy too. Like, he's going to carry a pretty reasonable height advantage in this one over Blair Bratag. Of course, as we said, he's coming up from middleweight. Still just 25 years of age for this young lad too. Like, still a lot of room to grow. He did have a loss in his last fight, so obviously be looking to come back and get himself in the win column. And I mean, like, what better feather in your cap to get yourself back in the win column over a guy like Blair Bragg. That'd certainly be a nice way to keep the rest of his career going too. I mean, we talk about Blair Bragg. I mean, this man making his way back to the light heavyweight division after, like we said, spending the last 4 fights of his career fighting at middleweight after making his light heavyweight or making his debut at light heavyweight in a round 1 KO win in just 39 seconds. I mean, you talk about this guy in terms of early knockouts. I've been saying this for a minute that I'd love to dub Blair Bragg, and I'm saying his right name on the podcast. Shout out Blair Bragg that I kept butchering your name last time on here because I kept saying Brett Blair Tag or whatever I was saying. We've already talked about this on Instagram, Blair, so I do apologize here on camera for butchering your name. But, I mean, you talk about the butchering side of the game. I mean, 2 wins at exactly 39 seconds in the first round does Blair Bragg have. Either way, he's getting the job done. I mean, he's had, like we said, 2 of those fights come at the exactly 39-second mark, but another one of his wins he's got done in the first round as well. The most recent of which came over Nick Kepu at Eternal 86. I mean, he's a kill or be killed man. Hasn't seen the final bell in 5 of his pro fights. He did suffer that submission win like we just talked about with Cam Rowson in his last fight. That was a big step up in competition for him. We've got to keep in mind that Blair's only been competing as a professional for the last 2 years, and Cam Rowson certainly came in with the experience advantage there. So that's nothing for for Blair to obviously he's disappointed, but that was a big step up in terms of competition for him, and he certainly had his moments in that fight, and he certainly looked good, and no doubt he'd be looking to come back and get himself back in the win column. But I mean, he's training at Team Compton Training Center. I mean, you'll talk about the guys from Team Compton, but I mean, he's already a guy with power, but he's got those guys down like sharpening the tools and working the technique side of his game. I mean, it's just an absolute recipe for good things. He said for this fight, he reckons he gets it done any way he wants. And I mean, it's hard to bet against the man. But I mean, I've spoken to him on the podcast as well. And one of the most fascinating things about Blair is he's one of the most intelligent, well-spoken, introspective people that I think I've ever talked to. Like if you talk to the guy, like you wouldn't know that he's an absolute killer inside the cage. Like, I don't really know how to describe him. Like, you'd almost think like he's like an accountant or something like that. Like, he's such a well-spoken dude, like, and he's a good-looking man, not to mention, by the way. I think I've seen him in a few social media adverts. So if this fighting thing doesn't work out for him, I think he's got another career there behind the camera. But, look, he's got the goods, man. See if this move back up to light heavyweight is going to pay dividends for him. Yeah, lots to talk about for this one in the light heavyweight division.
Man, it sounds like you want to drag Blair Bragg into the back of your Magna and go to Lookout Point, mate, on Friday night.
Hey, don't put it past me, brother. Don't put it past me.
He's a good-looking rooster, as Blair Bragg, and I love watching him fight too. One thing that I will add to what you've had to say about Bragg is his development every fight. So he's obviously got that intelligence. He's with the right team. Steve Compton seems to have this unique ability to work with a fighter's individual strengths and styles, and every time I see someone fight out of CMBT and Elliot Compton, of course, I see big changes in them. We've seen it with Don Marfan, we're seeing it with Blair Bragg, and that we know he had power at middleweight, so power up at light heavyweight is you just can't dispute that it's going to be there. When he touches you, he knows how to shut your lights out, and I think that's probably going to be the key against Luke Stockman. I wasn't familiar with Luke Stockman, but I've gone and have a little bit of a squiz, and what's immediately evident from Luke Stockman is he just hasn't had the cage time, and that's because he's been getting guys out in the first round, which is all fun and games, but he seems like a smart fella, and one thing that he's really looking forward to and aware of is that he needs to get some cage time in to start developing his style, to start finding out who he is as a fighter. And Blair Bragg, probably the worst guy to do that with. As you say, he's got a knack of finishing guys faster than it takes to cook a packet of 2-minute noodles for 39 seconds.
Yeah.
Maybe half a packet of 2-minute noodles. I don't know. But look, for Luke Stockman, he's the bigger and taller guy. He's got quite fast hands from what I've seen. So he'll need to put that height and reach out there, try and get behind a jab, try and catch Blair Tag dipping as he does to get into the mid-range, throw knees and uppercuts up the middle. Luke Stockman's got a good IBJJF grappling record. I looked him up on Smooth Comp and he's done really well. So he's got a good ground game. I just don't see a lot of transferables from the IBJJF style and the gi to MMA, but no doubt the team out there at Magna Fight Club will be making the necessary adjustments and they'll be having a good old squiz at Blair Tag. So it's an interesting one, light heavyweight. We don't see a lot of fighters up in those heavier weight divisions. We had the big old heavyweights in Viliamu back in Gold Coast, and everybody loved it. So looking forward to seeing a couple of big light heavyweights slug it out in Sydney.
We get a bit of action in the bantamweight division. One of the men we talked about on one of the more recent podcasts that we did, and one of the men that also competed at Eternal 91, Chris Ustianovsky, fighting against Corey Sutcliffe. Chris Ustianovsky was a guy that we were glazing over pretty hard last time we talked about him on the podcast, man, for good reason, just in terms of like his skill. I think you said, and I certainly agreed, that just one of the best, if not best, pure boxing prospects we have in mixed martial arts here in Australia. He did, of course, lose his last fight. A pretty devastating KO that he suffered at the hands of rising star Conor Burch. He's turning into just an absolute star in his own right so early in his career. So that's something that, he'll be able to dust off and certainly go on to, put a lot more wins on his record. I'm sure Chris Ustianovsky will. That was the only blemish on his record. That fight he did come into a little bit heavy as well. So that was something that he had to deal with, whether he had some weight cutting issues that hampered his preparation. I'm not too sure, but everything we saw prior to that in terms of the couple of fights that he had coming into that fight as a 2-0 fighter, just incredibly well-rounded game. Like he showed in that last fight that he had that went to decision. Like he showed absolutely everything, not just the boxing game, not just that beautiful left liver shot that he's got and just the footwork and everything that he's got as part of his game, but he showed off so much on the ground as well. And I don't think I've ever seen anyone throw a spinning back elbow in guard before on the ground. Like that was just an absolute crazy move in the last fight that he had against Jawad Rahabi. That was the fighter I was trying to think of there. But, that was on the heels of his nice win against James Sargison at Eternal 74 as well. I don't think it was Eternal 74, but his previous fight was against James Sargison. So he was on a roll until he had his last stoppage loss at Eternal 91. But he's another one of the guys that's fighting out of the Lions Den Academy too, under the guidance of Luke Pizzuti. And he's been training with him since the age of 6 years old. Like that's just crazy to think about in terms of like training under the one guy for so long, coming into this phase of his career. Like it's no wonder that he's got these skills that he's showing at this sort of part of his career. So very much looking forward to seeing Chris Ustianovsky back in the cage. Coming against Corey, the rebellious Corey Sutcliffe. We talked about Launceston there before, of course. We talk about Sean Etchell. This is another man originally from Launceston in Tasmania. He's back home apparently now in Tasmania for the first time as a pro, training with Sean Etchell there. I didn't know too much about Corey Sutcliffe, but just looking at his record and where he's been fighting, like he's been fighting like all around the globe in some interesting places. Like I'm seeing here, like has fought in India, has fought in Nepal, has fought in Texas, has fought back home now here in Australia. This is his first time competing for Eternal MMA as a pro, but he did fight at Eternal 49 as an amateur in a decision win. I mean, you take a look at his record, he's a 2-3 fighter, but look, that might not be doing his talents justice when you look at his record and some of the guys he's fought. And I talk about specifically just like looking at his fighters' records. This fight that he's coming in against Chris Ustianovsky looks like it's actually going to be the first time he's fighting a fighter that has less experience than what he does. Like you look at some of the names that he's fought, and it's not a small gap, like double the pro fights that he's had with a lot of these guys, like, fighting against guys that have had something like 3, 4, 5, 6 more fights than he has. So this is sort of the first time where he's coming into this one where he actually has more experience. So I think that's going to be a key for him in this one, albeit against a very dangerous Chris Ustianovsky. But just for the Chris Ustianovsky factor alone, I'm very excited. But seeing what Corey Sutcliffe can potentially do now that he's back home in Tasmania, now that he's got the experience factor on his side, this is an exciting one in the bantamweight division.
Yeah. Someone asked me, what fight on the other than the main event should they be looking out for when they come up to Sydney to check it out? And I mentioned this one, Chris Ushinovsky. Obviously, I'm a massive fan. His boxing is incredible. His ability to jab off the back foot, inspired by his favourite fighter, Piotr Yan, perhaps. Just so talented. Played national level soccer. This guy for Australia. Kind of had the world at his feet, but just loves MMA so much. And of course, that relationship and that love fostered through his mentor and Luke Pizzuti, who's been with, like mentioned, since he was 6. I love watching this guy fight. Wrapped that we get him back, and this time in Sydney, no less. Corey Sutcliffe, I actually wrapped his hands for his last fight in Melbourne. I was at the back with another fighter, so got to meet Corey Sutcliffe. I really like this guy, man. Like, just on a human level, he's a great guy. He's had a very unique experience in mixed martial arts. As you mentioned, he's fought all over the world. Well, he was based in Goa, which is in the southern tip of India, which is quite a tropical area of India. I've been there myself. A lot of Russians, and so there's an AKA there. A big mixed martial arts academy, and Corey Sutcliffe was working there as a coach, helping to develop the Indian talent. And of course, you get a lot of good, experienced guys come through that part of the world from Eastern Europe too. So he's very good, this Corey Sutcliffe, an excellent striker. Excellent striker out of both stances, has really good boxing. Models a lot of his stuff off Dominic Cruz, who's his favourite fighter, and has, when he's confident, has some real flair and is an incredibly dangerous, which makes this such an exciting matchup. I think these two will look to test their mettle on the feet, and this one's got real fight of the night potential. And I was rapt to hear that Corey Sutcliffe is back home now, working with his brothers. I think he mentioned 2 of his brothers, both mixed martial artists. So he's got his team back around him. He's based back home, so expecting big things from Corey Sutcliffe and Chris Ushinovsky.
This is one I really am looking forward to. And I know I keep saying that, but like every time I look down the list, and I keep thinking like, oh man, there's that fight. I'm talking about Emil Jerry's versus Christian Lapham in the middleweight division. And I mean, I'm speaking probably more specifically about Christian Lapham here, because Christian is a guy that I've been fascinated with for quite some time. I remember when I'd done some podcasts, going back quite a few months ago before he started a professional level. Brenton Mumford, of course, his coach was giving a few shout-outs saying, you've got to keep an eye off my boy Christian Lapham. You've got to keep an eye off my boy Christian Lapham. He's going to make big waves, and he certainly already has done that at an early phase of his career, just 22 years old. Facing Emil Jerry's, this is a 27-year-old out of Origin MMA in Sydney, New South Wales. This will be coming in for his 4th pro fight. But you look at his lone loss in his career, fought against a real, young up-and-comer in the game, real blue chipper by the name of Ben Johnston. Of course, our former Eternal MMA middleweight champion, just a little random bloke there that we had fighting for Eternal MMA. But he got himself, back in the win column outside of Eternal MMA, did Emil Jerry's in his last fight with a round 2 triangle choke submission. From what I've seen of Emil, because I have seen him fight before, like to me, like does seem like he's a guy that fights really light on his feet. From what I've seen, he does have some pretty dangerous tools in his striking game. He's got a fantastic range too. Like he's a tall, rangy fighter for the weight class. He will carry the height and reach advantage into this one against Christian Lapham. I mean, to make a guy like Christian Lapham look short, not short, but smaller, which actually makes me think one of the last fights that Christian Lapham had prior to the fight that he had against Damien Villar, his opponent ironically made him look a bit small. But I mean, Christian Lapham's a big dude, and Emil Jerry's will be coming in with the size advantage in this one. But again, I come back to Christian Lapham. I mean, just one of the real bright up-and-coming prospects that we have here in Australia. I mean, you mentioned CMBT there earlier in the podcast, and just everything that's going on good there and the talent they're fostering at that gym is just incredible. Obviously, Taser Malone fighting out of CMBT. He's at the top of the card there. But Brenton Mumford, his coach, and Miles Milwaukee, of course, are guiding him there too. Like, how can he not have the world at his fingertips, to do big things? He's actually been living with Brenton Mumford. I had Brenton Mumford on the podcast before his last fight as well, and talking about having Christian Lapham stay with him and keeping these young boys in check and guiding them on the right path. Christian is very much a guy that seems like his own dude and certainly needs that guidance. But I mean, you talk about a guy that's got some really good tools as a young middleweight. I mean, if he wants to make a run at this game, like he's really got some good things, I believe, that can take him far. I mentioned the skills there, but I mean, for me, for the age of 22, the fight IQ and the patience that he has is what I think is really going to take him far. Because, I mean, you look at just a couple of fights he's had, he's not in a rush. He trusts in his training. He trusts in his coaching. And you can see that he can really kind of methodically sort of feel his way through a fight. And, not a lot of young bucks, want to kind of play it that way. A lot of young guys want to kind of go in, kind of guns blazing. But Christian's got a real poise to his game that I really like. Don't let that fool you, though, because, I mean, it's not going to be long before this dude starts putting guys to sleep. Like, he really does have that power in his hands, and he's got a lot of good weapons that he can certainly bring to the game. Like I said, I mean, I've had him on the podcast before, and he's just he's a guy I'm fascinated by because he's just nothing sort of seems to faze him. He goes about his own pace in the cage, and he goes about his own pace in life as well. He's not trying to be someone. He's got such a great personality kind of under that chilled exterior that he's kind of got. Like, he's someone that could really truly end up being, like, I know this is early days, but he's kind of got a little bit of a star quality there kind of simmering underneath the surface. He's such a fascinating character. If it doesn't work out for him, he is the number one tent salesman on the Gold Coast. He will tell you that. The only thing he needs to do is he needs to up his social media game, because I can't be having more social media followers than you, Christian Lapham. I know you're not a big social media guy, but listen, I'm a nobody, man. You're going to be a somebody. Your coach has been telling you got to up the social media game, so I'm going to call out your skills and tell them they're fantastic, but you got to up the social media presence, man. I need to see more of you out there. The world needs to know who you are, because you're on the cusp of big things, man. But look, that's not to take away anything from Emil Jerry's, because this is a fascinating fight in the middleweight division. This one could go absolutely either way. I know you've had a look at this one. What are you seeing here in the middleweight division between these two boys?
Well, if you can survive living with Brenton Mumford, then you can survive just about anything. I barely survived a weekend on the Terps with Brenton Mumford in Auckland, but I stand here to tell the tale.
Congratulations.
Mate, I was a big fan of Christian Lapham through his amateur career. I actually flew him down to the Surf Coast, where I'm from, to fight on my showdown here, Salt Fight Series. I liked him so much. For a big guy, he moves just like Brenton, unsurprisingly. Has a lot of those same qualities. You can tell he's been mentored by him. Lightning fast. He's so precise. Rhythm and cadence is perfect. Always looking to put himself in a position where he's got an advantage over his opponent, whether it be through his footwork or by having his hands above his opponents. He's got a good feint game. He's really good at dictating terms. And he'll need to be against Emil Jerry's, who's got a ton of power. He's also got incredible finishing ability on top of that power. I believe he finished all of his amateur fights in the first round that he won, so he's a hard hitter. And I think that's probably the key when you're talking about taking on a guy like Christian Lapham. Get in there, try and take away his movement, kick his legs, try and catch him circling, and hit him hard. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Christian Lapham maybe mixing some wrestling in this one too. I'm really interested to see what Origin Gym and CMBT look like when they go head-to-head strategy-wise. That's always something that really interests me with two of their hot young prospects leading the charge like Beyblades or something, it's a really good fight. Great. Mate, this whole card's mental. Now that I'm actually sitting there and going through it. It's such a ripper card. So, looking forward to this one.
I know, and that's why I said, every time I kind of scroll down my notes here and I'm like, oh, this is a fight I'm really looking forward to, but I keep saying that about every fight. But it's so true, because every fight is just so friggin' cool. I mean, it truly is stacked top to bottom, and that's not wearing the Eternal MMA cap. There is a lot of fantastic fights on here, and I mean, just on that point with this fight specifically, I mean, in the middleweight division, I think we talked a little bit about this recently, but it's really finally good to see some action happening in the middleweight division here in Australia. That just has sort of come out of nowhere with the young and up-and-coming prospects, but a few of the older guys we kind of got in the mix now, because for a little tiny bit it was just kind of John Martin Fraser and sort of Matt Myers fighting each other a couple of times and not a ton of challenges kind of coming through. But now we got guys like Alfred Steiner on the come up. Of course, we've got Cam Rouston in the mix now. We've got these up-and-comers like Christian Lapham, Emil Jerry's in there. I know Blair Bratag is fighting at light heavyweight, but I mean, he's a guy that could jump back down to the middleweight division himself. So, we've always seen so much action with Eternal MMA and Australian MMA at large with the kind of, your flyweights, your bantamweights, and your lightweights and your featherweights and everything. It's really good to see some challenges, some up-and-coming guys, duking it out in the middleweight division. I'm very keen to see how things play out here for Eternal MMA with that in particular. So, let's see where that fight goes, the Emil Jerry's and Christian Lapham, because that could potentially have, I don't want to say title implications because it's early days for these guys here, but the only reason I say that, especially for a guy like Christian Lapham, and we've seen guys like, obviously Taser Malone's only 4-0 and he's got a title fight coming up. Of course, we got Quillan Salkild. He's in the UFC. He was only 3-0 when he got his first title shot. So, depending how things shake out potentially for these guys in the next couple of fights, and we could see those guys start getting involved sooner rather than later. So keep an eye out on that particular space. Now, we're down to the last fight that we have at least confirmed for this card, because we had a couple of fights unfortunately drop off. We did have Oscar Marlowe is potentially still on the card pending if we do get him a fight. But the last remaining one we at least have confirmed is in the featherweight division between Alex Pineris and Mason Nobetsu. Now, Alex Pineris, 26-year-old, fighting out of Warrior Training Academy in New South Wales. He's 0-1, of course, to start his career, which he only just kicked off in March of last year. However, has to be said, that was against one Alistair Volders, and we know what a young up-and-coming prospect that Alistair Volders is turning out to be. We, of course, saw Alistair Volders compete on it. I can't remember if it was Eternal 90 or Eternal 91, that double-header card that we had at the end of last year, but Alistair Volders is certainly turning out to be one of the brightest prospects we have in the country. So not a bad loss to start your career. It does look like he is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu coach. So in terms of I haven't really seen much of him personally outside of seeing, his fight with Alistair Volders. But you got to imagine that he's got some skills on the ground, given that he is a BJJ coach. But he does look like he has some finishing elements to his game. Because when you look at his amateur record, I mean, he's finished 4 of his 6 opponents at the amateur level. Does have a round 1 KO win over the aforementioned Oscar Marlowe as well, who is now a 1-0 professional fighter. He's, of course, still waiting for an opponent. But, he's given up his profession as a carpenter. He wants to make a full-time run at this thing. And, what better way to kickstart the rest of that by getting yourself a win, your first pro win at Eternal 92. That's got to come, though, over Mason Nobetsu. And then Mason Nobetsu, he's another one of these fighters that when you look at his career, I mean, a man that started his career at 1 and 2, doesn't quite tell the full story. I mean, he started his pro career with a loss over the man, to the man that's actually competing for that featherweight title at the top of the card in Taser Malone. Did bounce back from that with a win with a round 3 leg kick finish. His third fight, one of the greatest fights that I've ever personally seen in my life. I believe it was actually one of my fights for Fight of the Year in 2024, and a fight against Brogan Stewart at Eternal 86. He did lose that fight in the third round to being finished by Brogan, but my God, that fight was competitive right the way through. It's one of these fights that I can just watch over and over again and makes me get out of my seat. I don't do that a lot these days. I can kind of compose myself. There are so many moments in that fight, and Mason Nobetsu was a big reason for this, of just doing these ones and wanting to get out of my chair, and I still do that on replay, watching it back. So look, for a guy like Mason Nobetsu, started 1 and 2 in his career, but certainly for me, a man that has a lot more wins in his future, for sure, if he wants to keep a run at it. But it goes down between himself and Alex Pineris in the featherweight division for what is at least looking like it's our first fight to kick off that card, at least confirmed so far.
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with Alex Pineris or Warriors Training Academy, but I did have a quick look back at a couple of his fights. He is a BJJ brown belt on the deck, so very good grappling. Looks to have a Taekwondo style, so his chin's quite high in the air. He's able to kick quite well and counter with short, fast punches. He's quite a well-rounded fighter, and it was those skills that allowed him to go 6-1 as an amateur. So, a good, solid career as an amateur, set himself up for a pro. Look, everyone's fallen over underneath Alistair Volders, aren't they? And, a tough way to get your pro career off to a start. He'll be looking to turn that ship around against Mason Nobetsu, who, like you mentioned, hasn't had an easy road of it either, but so much talent, man, oozing out of this kid. I know that he did. Being an absolute boy, specifically for this camp, he's been working with Jack Jenkins, also preparing for the following day in Sydney. So, no better training partner than Jack, one of the hottest talents that the UFC has in the featherweight division, charging his way forward. It's the kicking game of Nabetsu. He's a Malaysian born, but I believe lived in Japan and did a lot of karate with his grandfather. So he's got excellent kicking game, very diverse. He's really good in the scramble too. He's good at snatching a back. I saw him snatch the back in one of his amateur fights against a very good young grappler down here, and it was so fast. One submission on the night on that particular promotion. He's very, very good in the scramble. What he needs to do is avoid a war. So he's had a couple of those against Taser and against Brogan. He needs to sit back and play the percentage game against Panaris to take himself to 2-2 even, because there's big things in the future for Nabetsu. He just needs a couple under his belt.
Yeah, that was an interesting tidbit as well. There we just talk about the fact that Alex Panaris had started his career against Alistair Valdez and, of course, Mason Nabetsu training out of Absolute MMA, of course, where Alistair Valdez himself is from. So they do believe, Mason believes they do have some intel in terms of coming into that fight against Alex Panaris, given that there is that sort of link between those two fighters previously fighting each other. So that's another one to look forward to, certainly. Whether it's going to be the first fight that kicks off the night, we'll wait and see, because like we said, at this stage, Oscar Marlowe is still on the card pending potentially getting another opponent there, but we'll certainly see how it shakes out. If it doesn't come to fruition, I mean, there's plenty there to sink our teeth into, man. Obviously, you're going to be sitting there cage side. You'll get to see all the action up close. I'll get to watch you from the living room, enjoy your commentary, and watch the fights here with a beer in my hand. So I'm equally excited, all things considered, on what is just another massive weekend in mixed martial arts for Australia, man. The UFC in town the next day for UFC 312. I mean, we got, I think there's like 5 fighters in that card that have previously competed for Eternal MMA. You mentioned Jack Jenkins there before, our former featherweight champion for Eternal MMA. Quillan Salkeld, our former lightweight champion. Tom Nolan, absolute killer of a lightweight that we had here for Eternal MMA. Kevin Doucet, of course, has previously fought for Eternal MMA as well. So some fantastic representation there. I know there's one there that's escaping my mind there at the moment, but fantastic weekend for Australian mixed martial arts all around, man, in Sydney. It's going to be a good time.
Yeah, dude, crazy. And then the following day we got the Super Bowl too. So
yeah, we
if you're into that, it's a bit of a trifecta.
I took the next day off work for that because I know I'm not going to be in good shape after the Super Bowl, because I'm putting one together for that too. So it's going to be a massive weekend all around. I'm not looking forward to it. The recovery from that, to be perfectly fair. Yeah,
I reckon. Me and Tanado will head up and watch the Super Bowl, mate. I'll be pretty dusty come Tuesday, I reckon. I've got commentary duties. I'm going to be back in centre cage doing the in-ring interviews. I really enjoyed doing those to him for the first time.
Yeah.
Up in Gold Coast, so getting that again. We've got a fun little commentary booth, a new combination that we're putting together for Sydney. So, yeah, new venue, massive venue. I've heard that there's only 50-odd tickets left. So if you haven't got your ticket at the time this comes out, you better go and get one, because they're going to get snuffled up real quick. The Sydney crowds go off too, man. So they're going to be hyped ahead on UFC Eve. Can't wait.
Can't wait, brother. I mean, like we said there, if you haven't got your tickets, get them at eternalmma.com. If you're not going live and in person, you know what we always say. You can, of course, watch the main card live and exclusive on UFC Fight Pass, and check out all the good fights the next day for UFC 312, where you get to see some of our former stars from Eternal MMA throw down on that card in, like we said, what is an excellent weekend for mixed martial arts here in Australia. I'm looking forward to it. Matt's looking forward to it. We'll talk about all the fights after the fact, no doubt. Break it all down for what happened. A couple of fascinating title fights at the top, and just a stacked card top to bottom, right through the main card and the prelims. Pro fights galore. So many fascinating matchups. So many things to sink our teeth into. Appreciate doing the podcast. You as always, man. Thank you very much for your time. Enjoy Sydney. I know you will. Looking forward to seeing you there through the TV. It's going to be a good one, man. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, for sure, bro. Love doing it with you, man. Looking forward to recapping all the fights come the following week.